for the holidays. Then Bob Buckham's going to be telling us about science and astroimaging, and Kevin Francis is going to be talking about his astroimaging journey. A rather fascinating fellow, and he's got a lot of things to tell us, I think. Then we've got a couple of weeks where we don't have anybody scheduled yet, and we've got a lot of people that we need to schedule. The hardest part about putting on the astroimaging channel, we love doing it. We love being here for you guys and putting on the show every week, but we need you guys to step up. Ray stepped up last week and told us some really cool stuff. He's one of us. He's a regular, and you see him over there in the comments making comments, right? So Ray's astrophotography stepped up last week. You can step up too. So please do show. To contact us, just go over to the contact us on the astroimagingchannel.org to the contact sheet. Tell us who you are, your first name, your last name, your email, and what you want to talk to us about. And really, if it all sounds reasonable, we could probably arrange for something. It's not hard to do. All you need is a webcam with a microphone. A good laptop ought to do you. If you got a headset, it's nice, but you don't need any fancy software or anything else. And it's really pretty simple to do. If you can put together some kind of a PowerPoint telling us about some experience you've had in astroimaging or something you want to tell us about, go for it. Let me go back to the calendar page for a minute. You notice Will Young is going to be talking about night vision imaging. Will, you awake out there? Could you go ahead and share your screen? Yeah, could you share your screen? Oh, show us who you are, maybe, and tell us what you're going to be, or even just tell us what you're going to be doing a little bit next week, and convince these people they need to be here.
And you don't have to share your screen to start talking.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I don't know if I was still sharing. I forgot if I turned it off or not. But yeah, I'll be here next week. My name is Will. I run the pages for Deep Sky Dude. Started that back in 2016, and it's just a place where I go and throw all of my astronomy fun stuff. Just whatever I'm shooting. And so my talk next week will really be focused on like how to get quick and easy images that kind of like, people enjoy enough to wow people, right? Yeah, you can find me at deepskydude.com, and I'll be here, and it should be fun. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Whoops. When I went into my share, I got to get out of here. Skip ads. There we go. There we go. I'm still should be sharing my screen, and I can see that you guys have already started over here in all the comments section. And as you can see, there's a lot of stuff you can go on. If you have a question, type in a big Q over here so we can see that we've got a question from you over here. And if you want to say something, go ahead and say it here. Also, there's a place down here where you can go ahead and subscribe to the astroimaging channel right here. Okay, you see that? And where's our count? Where's our count? Our count is up to something like about 9,900. And as you all know, my goal for Christmas, my one present that I want, is to hit 10,000. So if you're out there watching and you haven't yet subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe so we can hit 10,000 subscribers in the astroimaging channel. Okay? There's one other place we needed to go. Oh, it's down here. And let's kick into my PowerPoint. As you know, a couple of months back, we did a show where we put together a bunch of images from what is happening here. We put together a bunch of images from people who were taking pictures of the comet Atlas. I think it was, maybe it was NEOWISE. I forget which one it was, but it's still on the website. You can go and look at it on the YouTube website. Our next effort is going to get you guys to participate by showing us things on from Orion. Now, it can be anything within Orion. If you've got pictures of sunspots on Betelgeuse, whoa, that's pretty cool. If you just want to show us a nice double star, yeah, go for it. Any other thing, or the whole patch of Orion up there, that's fine. Anything. So anything that's in Orion, it can be movie or still. It's got to come from this apparition, meaning you can't bring up last year's picture of Orion or something like that. And it's got to be submitted by February 7th. Now, this slide here is to show you one person. Greg D has already submitted something. He's got a picture of a comet. I think that's another comet Atlas going through Orion. There was a whole set of instructions here, but Miss Molly has decided that she didn't like those instructions in our pre-game meeting. So I hurriedly changed this to say, don't submit anything yet until until we get it all straightened out how we want to do it. Basically, as I was putting these pictures together today, I noticed that we've got a little bit of a problem in that the pictures that are presented, they come out a little small when they go into the Facebook group. And when they go in small, they're okay, but they're not very high resolution. You can see they get pixelated and stuff like that. And we don't want that to happen. So we think it would be better if we could figure out an email address for submission, and you can just go ahead and submit them to us in their full living glory. And that would actually make it much easier for us to do things, because it's real hard to take these images and make them bigger and all that other stuff and make them quality images. So please hold off on your submissions, but do get out there like you need to be told to go take pictures of Orion. But do go out there and start taking pictures of Orion. Okay, now if I can figure out how to stop sharing my screen. Where's my share my screen button? It's not here anymore. So maybe Molly can take charge and take my screen sharing away. But Andy is here. Andy, can you go start sharing your screen now? And let's get on what you're going to be doing. Okay.
Says that you're still sharing.
Now I got it.
Hang on a second.
All right.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. There we go. Okay. Let's get my mouse up here. All righty. You got me there, guys?
Yeah, you're good.
Excellent. Well, thanks for inviting me back. It's fun to come back and talk to you lovely people 6 weeks after we started. And what I thought I'd do is have a little chat about creating dynamic images. We'll just briefly recap where we were last time. And then I've got some fun stuff for you as well today, guys. So hope you enjoy the show. In case anyone didn't tune in 6 weeks ago, and of course you can always go and find the material online, but I'm Andy. I'm a professional photographer by day. You can probably see my studio behind me because it's lunchtime here in Australia. So that's my studio, my family, a bit of judging going on, and a Takahashi that resides in my backyard. When I say my backyard, I'm a urban imager primarily. I'm in Melbourne, Australia. It's a pretty large city of 5 million people, and as of today, we are 25 days in a row with no COVID infections whatsoever. How about that? We endured the world's toughest lockdown for 3 months, and by tough, I mean we were, you couldn't drive more than 5 kilometres, you could only go out once a day, you had to wear masks, of course, and a whole bunch of other restrictions, including our businesses all being closed down. But 3 months later, I guess, now that we're on the end of that, we are effectively COVID-free here. So that's a pretty minor breakthrough. Melbourne, of course, is also known for food and sport. So that's my town in a nutshell. I'm in the burbs, so much of my imaging is narrowband. I've used a variety of telescopes over the years, including Newtonians, refractors, and RCs, and so forth. This is a Newtonian that I enjoyed using up until last year. It was hand built by the guys at Sidereal Trading. It's a fantastic light bucket, sucks in those photons at f4 and does a great job. This is its super baby brother. I've still got this one, although I'm not sure why I've hung onto it. Probably just sentimental reasons, really. It's not compatible with my current full frame camera, but good little toy, and I won a few iPods with it, and it's a brilliant little thing from the guys at Stellaview. Current weapon of choice, this is the TAC TOA 130 with the QSI full frame camera on the back of it that I was fortunate enough to win competition that QSI put on. Little did I know that I would then have to go and buy 2-inch filters for the thing, and 7 of them, youch. But still, it's all been worthwhile, and a few notches as a result of having the lovely toys. In touch with me on the website, Instagram, because I also run mentoring. I have clients that I mentor all around the world, different countries there. Really matter if you're a raw beginner or if you're an advanced imager looking for some assistance with ideas and concepts and computers. SG, make it work with your gear. Who bought a telescope, know how to use it, and after 8 sessions, he's now solving, auto-focusing, taking beautiful sharp pics and loving it. But what I wanted to touch on today was the dynamic image recipe to continue from part 1 that we did 6 weeks back. And what we talked about just as an overview was we touched on some technical criteria that we all establish as, we all know that, you know, it's got to be right. Your field has to be flat, your stars need to be round, your guiding needs to be spot on, etc., etc. We get all that it's a natural part of the process. We touched briefly on the fact that when we process an image, it can take as long or longer to process an image that we've captured the data for. And there's a lot of craftsmanship and technique that we can use there. But mainly what we focused on last time was subjective criteria to make timeless, impactful images that seem somehow to be or overlooked in some cases with astro imaging. Some of us would probably be guilty of getting so caught up in the technical experience that we sort of lose track a little bit of the I guess the content of what we're actually shooting and some of the drama that we could be. And essentially what we touched on were these points, and we went into each one at a time. So I won't go through all that again, obviously, because this is a whole new show for you today. But we do have a couple of things that we missed out on last time. And those are specifically here for you. We had some questions about narrowband imaging itself, what that was all about. I want to share some thoughts on researching targets. We're going to have a fun little discussion about AI, denoise, and the ethics of using AI and astro imaging. That's an interesting topic. That's one to look for about halfway through the show today. So getting straight into it, just to recap a little bit about what narrowband imaging is all about. This is obviously a stunning, amazing, and world-famous image, and obviously it's not mine. Wish it was. But this is probably Hubble's most famous picture of the Pillars of Creation in M16, aka the Eagle Nebula. And obviously what we're looking at here is a star nursery. And when you combine 3 things, dust, heat, and gravity, with enough forces at play, stars can be born in these nurseries. During that process, I guess a bunch of ionized gases are there that we can actually photograph because they emit light at various specific wavelengths. And the one that I guess is most often seen is hydrogen alpha. Now, if you have a terrestrial classic DSLR camera, it's got an IR UV filter built into it that basically precludes the chance of actually recording any hydrogen alpha. So you can either modify that camera and have that filter removed. A dedicated astronomical camera which is ready to go. It'll be a bit more sensitive in the spectrum that you can capture light, or you can in fact get a mono camera with dedicated filters. And just to give you an example of what we're talking about there, the image on the left here is taken purely with a hydrogen alpha filter on a mono camera. And what we're seeing here are, I guess, the building blocks of this particular nebula and the dust in behind it. Now, you notice up on the top right image where it's straight RGB, none of that's showing. So I guess we're missing part of the story. And I guess as astro imagers, some of us are very curious about, well, what makes a nebula? Why is it so? So when we then combine the hydrogen alpha with the RGB, as we have in the bottom right, we get the best of both worlds. We can tell the whole story a little bit more about what's actually happening up there in space. And of course, we can make a pretty picture too. But then with narrowband, we can go another step, because there are other emissions that we can capture. Because there's also ionized oxygen and there's ionized sulfur. And these are the three primary emissions that we like to capture, as does indeed the Hubble Space Telescope. And so you can see on the bottom diagram, the wavelength of ionized oxygen is in the middle of that green and blue area, around 500 nanometers. So that's running at 656, and the ionized sulfur is 671. So if we were to make a picture using these three filters and assign one to red, to green, and to blue, we'd have I guess a green, red, and very red image. Not terribly much. So what the Hubble scientists do is they assign the ionized oxygen to blue, the hydrogen alpha to green, and the ionized oxygen, the ionized sulfur to red, so that when they look at an image, they can quickly determine by which color it is what the content of that nebula actually is. And I'll show you an example of that broken down here. So this is something called the Gabrieli-Mistral Nebula within Eta Carina. And this is a southern object. I'm sorry you guys up in the north don't get this one because it's big and spectacular. And this is just a very, very small portion of it. And it's called Gabrieli-Mistral because if you turn your head sideways and squint and sort of use your imagination, it somehow resembles the face of a Chilean poet, Gabrieli-Mistral. But you sort of really do need to use your pareidolia imagination to do that. But here it is in hydrogen alpha. And you can see there's quite a lot of information there and a lot going on. If we now just look at that purely through the ionized oxygen filter, we don't see nearly as much. But what we do see is the hot young stars, if you like, the boy bands in space, in that pool of ionized oxygen in the center of the frame. Stars are being born there because obviously there's a whole heap of ionized oxygen and plenty of information that's being shown. Through the ionized sulfur filter, you can now see the shock fronts where the ionized oxygen meets the hydrogen alpha and indeed creates a very definitive pattern. You can probably see Gabrieli-Mistral's face a little bit more clearly now at the center of the frame, upside down with the nose pointing towards 6 o'clock. So when we combine these, as we just talked about earlier, we apply the hydrogen alpha to green, the oxygen to blue, and the ionized sulfur to red, we get an image that looks like this. And this is your classic Hubble Space Telescope palette, where you have these blues and golden colors, and of course you'll also see magenta stars. That's just a process of narrowband imaging. Now that's great if you're a Hubble scientist and you want to be able to do some astrophysics with that. But if you're a photographer like me and you think, well, you know what, that's nice, but I'd rather create a scientifically valid but much prettier picture. Well, we could refine that image in Photoshop and tweak those colors, in this case using selective color. And I think as a result, it looks a little bit more dynamic. I've also replaced those narrowband stars completely using RGB stars. And so that gem cluster at the bottom right of the frame, it's quite pretty and beautiful. And you can now see the yellow and blue stars that make it up. Putting RGB stars in their narrowband images, and that's purely subjective and totally okay. Some people just like to take the narrowband stars, take the purple out of them and just let them be, which is totally okay too. So this is all subjective choices that we can make. When it comes to image processing itself, my weapon of choice is AstroPixel processor nowadays. I found this very intuitive and quite easy to use, visually pleasing, so I don't get sort of lost within it. And you can literally throw everything into it. You can throw in your lights, your subs, your darks, your flats, your dark flats, your bias. You can throw it, and if you've done a meridian flip, you can just throw it in without having to turn it around again. And it will register every frame. It will pre-process and calibrate each. It'll apply the darks and the flats. And eventually it'll spit out integrations of each filter for you. And you then got a fair bit of control over what you do with those integrated masters, including a very good light pollution removal application within the software, right up to combining your LRGB images and using star color correction should you wish to do so. I tend to do most of that in Photoshop, and this is a screenshot, an example of my workflow that I guess follows fairly traditional paths in some ways of as you work your way up the image pyramid with all the layers. You can see your hydrogen alpha, O3 and S2. You've got illuminance and then color like we just talked about with the previous example. And then some fine tuning with color balance, noise reduction, and a bit of tweaking in NIC. I find NIC, DxO NIC filters are very useful for Astro image processing. And then you can see I've layered the RGB stars over the top in lighten mode. So I guess what I haven't mentioned here is there was a step in between where I've used StarNet to remove the stars altogether. Okay. What that all means is that we can take pictures from our backyards that look like this using narrowband imaging. Now, this is an object, again, it's one that we get pretty well in the south, and it's not far from Orion, so you could probably capture it up in the northern hemisphere as well. It's an interesting thing. You've got a Wolf-Rayet star there right in the center, the bluish one. And it's basically had, I guess, a little bit of a pre-supernova heart attack, if you like. And all these crazy stellar winds that are blowing madly from this super hot ionized oxygen star have created a bubble around itself. And of course, that bubble will eventually burst. But this bubble of ionized oxygen, I mean, it's huge. And it makes a really interesting target, sometimes known as the Dolphin Nebula. But again, you can capture something like this that otherwise, you know, from my, would be absolutely impossible. You can also, of course, capture images like this one. This is one of mine that was pretty well known and did reasonably well in competitions and so forth. Right here is the famous HELIX Nebula. It's died a natural death, a gentle death. It's not going supernova, or it hasn't gone supernova. It's just reached the end of its natural life. A bit like our star, you'd need a star that's really, really huge to go supernova. This one it's kind of reached the end of its life. It's gone to a red giant phase, and then it's dissipated that stellar material out, and that's that outer ejection, that orange, that hydrogen alpha that you're looking at there. And then 5,000 years later, it's then had a second collapse and ejection of the ionized oxygen, which is the bluish, the iris area, if you like. Now that in itself looks quite good in RGB, but when you get your narrowband onto it, it's an opportunity to really show how far those ejections have gone. And I guess 75 hours of data is a bit of a, well, it's a bit of a labor of love. But to get those outer chevrons showing through my light polluted backyard, I think I worked out at one stage there I was getting 1 pixel per hour out there, but it worked out pretty well. I guess using a fair bit of masking to really enhance those, or let those ionized oxygen radial features showing that really do resemble the iris. So I want to talk about research now. And research is basically there for everyone, but let's just put our Star Party hat on for a second. And of course, we all know that Star Parties are probably on hold at the moment because of COVID, but it's a really enjoyable thing to go to a Star Party with your colleagues, pack up all your gear and head out to a beautiful dark side where you don't have light pollution. And you set up all your toys and you get everything ready and you know, hopefully everything's working as perfectly as it did back at home. And when it's all up and running, what I like to do is to go mingling with my colleagues, meet new people, say hi, look at their equipment and ask them a question, you know, so what are you imaging tonight? And inevitably I'll get this question thrown back at me of, well, what do you mean? I haven't decided. I'm not sure. Maybe M42. And so, sure, that's not the case for everyone, but I guess with a little bit of planning and research, there's a whole bunch of targets that are out there that maybe don't get attention that they deserve. And yeah, sure, some of them are a little bit darker and harder, but I thought I'd just talk a little bit about how some of these off the beaten track targets can be found, because they do really bring quite a lot of joy when you image something that no one else has imaged. So if we just bring up this image a little closer for you, and the image I'm going to show you is something called Galaxy Map. And this is a hydrogen alpha supercosmos survey of this portion of the Milky Way. So if you just think for a moment that there's research telescopes all around the world, just to point at the heavens and take a picture, move a degree across, take another picture, move up a degree, take another picture, move back to the starting point, but down a degree, take a picture, until eventually they build a kind of a Google map of the sky, if you like. And so these Google Maps of the sky, if we call them surveys, call them whatever you will, they're available to anyone. You just got to go online and find them. And so with this particular one here, you can see as you scroll across from left to right, you can see inverted in this case, the lagoon and the Trifid. You can scroll across a bit further, you'll see the Sagittarius star cloud. Moving further across, you'll see the Lobster Nebula right in the center of the frame there, next to the Cat's Paw Nebula, right in the middle. Further to our right, you'll trip across the Prawn Nebula. The prawn, mate, if you chuck a shrimp on the barbie. Sorry, it's my Australian vernacular coming through. The Dark Tower, right up to, on the far right, the Fighting Dragons of Ara 6188. But then what caught my eye here was being familiar with all of those. It was at the bottom right of the frame. It was this wacky looking spidery net, if you like. And I thought, what the heck is that? Now I'm talking about, it's at about 4 o'clock here, guys, at the bottom of the frame from the right-hand side. And I thought, what is that? So I started Googling madly to try and find an image or a reference or something. And I couldn't find a single thing. There was nothing. Zip, nada. So I thought I'll go and photograph it. And little did I know that this was going to become a project that would take me 6 months, because the thing was so big that with my little teeny tiny SV70T telescope that I showed you earlier, it became a 6-panel mosaic. And because it's quite dim, it took a lot of nights to get each panel with sufficient data. But to my knowledge, to this day, that's still the only high-res color image that's taken of this thing around. And yeah, the APOD guys got excited and they posted it. But it's just an example that, you know, there is stuff out there that with a little bit of research can be found and shared with the world. So how about another one? Let's go back to Galaxy Map again, but this time panning around a little bit way there. Now you're probably familiar with the area top left at 8 or 9 o'clock there. Sorry, 10 or 11 o'clock, which is of course the Vela supernova remnant. And that's a fantastic piece of the sky to photograph, and many people have done it wonderful justice. Where a star exploded and went supernova 11,000 years ago and scattered its stellar material across the heavens at 500,000 kilometers an hour. And you'll find Herschel's ray in there, of course. And when the material hits stellar dust, it superheats it. And so it's a really good target for narrowband because there's lots of differentiation between ionized oxygen and hydrogen alpha, etc. in there. But moving further across and following this shockwave through the middle of the frame, all the way across to the right. And by the way, the thing behind that is the fact, the background of this slide presentation. It's a thing called the electric guitar cluster. Down the bottom there's a thing that looks a bit like a tooth. And I thought, what the heck is that? Again, 2-3 years back now, I hadn't seen it photographed before, couldn't find examples of it online. So I thought, all right, well, let's take a picture of it. And it turned out that it's called BBW56. And what I found with this was quite unique in that there's virtually no ionized oxygen present here. So I made a unique combination of hydrogen alpha, ionized sulfur, and ionized nitrogen filters to create this tricolor broadband image, narrowband image. Now, if you've got a hydrogen alpha filter of greater than 5 nanometers, it already includes the nitrogen bandwidth. So you're already getting that information. So if you want to separate that out, you need to get a 3 nanometer hydrogen alpha filter so that you can separate out the ionized nitrogen band and then assign that to a different color. And of course, a 3 nanometer hydrogen alpha or 3 nanometer ionized nitrogen filters are not cheap. And I think they package them with the tube of KY jelly to ease the pain of purchase when you get them. But as it turned out, I wasn't the only one to be photographing this. In fact, one of my colleagues here in Australia, a gentleman called Mike Sidonio, aka Strongman Mike, who's a world-class imager. Mike was photographing the thing purely by coincidence the same week that I was. Here in hydrogen alpha and RGB, I think you'd all agree it looks a little bit like giant at this orientation. Another version of this is by a gentleman called John Gleason. You can see BBW56 at the top right of the frame there, around about 3 o'clock and come in a few degrees. And there it is with the looking at the Vela supernova remnant in the center of the frame. There's another nice version of this that I've seen recently published by the Telescope guys, Philippe Bernhardt, who's tackled this as well. So it's getting more popular by the day, as indeed was Sharpless 308 that I showed you earlier, and some of these other slightly off the beaten track targets that are out there for us. And there's that electric guitar cluster in the background of the image that you can see with that band of that wave of hydrogen, if you like, that was leading on to BBW56. So continuing our journey of research here, if we head into the Large Magellanic Cloud, now I'm very sorry for Northern Hemisphere folks. You don't get this. In fact, it wasn't until Ferdinand Magellan was doing a circumnavigation in about 1500 AD that in fact first noticed and recorded these clouds of Magellan, the large and the small Magellanic Clouds. They're companion galaxies of the Milky Way. As such, they've got this extraordinary range of nebulas within them, many of which become fantastic targets. And you're probably familiar, even in the Northern Hemisphere, you would have seen pictures of a thing called the Tarantula Nebula, which is the biggest and brightest nebula in the Large Magellanic Cloud. You can see it there at 8 o'clock. Big and bright that if it were as close to us as Orion is, it would be casting shadows in the middle of the day. It's massive, this thing. But it's surrounded by these cute little nebulae that you can see in this image by Goldman and Druidus. So if you look directly above the tarantula, there's what I call the wacky races that Dick Dastardly and co. and Penelope Pitstop. There's if you go way up to the top right, there's a thing called the Bean Nebula, which gets a bit of traction. But there's also this guy in the center of the frame, just up a little higher, a few degrees up from the center, that made a pretty good target in its own right. And I think there's only a handful of images of this going. And I call this one the hookah pipe, largely because I guess when I was visiting Egypt, you'd see these gentlemen sitting around cafes smoking these shishas. And if they look a little bit like this thing, in fact, you can see this kind of thing that looks like a smoke ring at the top of the frame, which is, I don't know what that even is. But it's an extraordinary formation and well worth taking the time to image. If we head a little further along on our journey of wacky things in the Large Magellanic Cloud, we've got a recent picture that I took called, I call it the Carnival of the Animals, because it's a strange little, almost a parade, if you like, of bizarre and wacky shaped critters like those floats that you'd see in Mardi Gras. But that's NGC 1727 and co. And to my knowledge, I don't think those guys have been photographed by, well, anyone else really in that grouping. I mean, certainly you'll see them in wide field shots, but no one seems to have zoomed in on those particularly to bring them, give them their day in the sun. So there's lots of interesting things out there, folks, that haven't had their 15 minutes of fame. So I'd encourage you to poke around, do a bit of research, and maybe show us something that we haven't seen before. So what I thought I'd touch on now is AI software. And here we go. Let's open up this can of worms, folks, because I'm sure there'll be people out there who will be divided in their opinions about whether or not we should be incorporating this into our imaging. But anyway, let's look at some of the pros and cons and see what it's all about. Alrighty. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm a photographer by day. And I also mentioned earlier that we were in lockdown for 4 months. So I had to do this thing called virtual headshots, which is where I would literally do a Zoom meeting with a client and get them to stand in the right place and be in the right environment with the right background. And then I'd get their mother, cousin, little sister, brother, whatever, with an iPhone or ideally a DSLR, but probably a phone, to photograph them under my direction and then send me the images, which I would then clean up and do my best to make a semi-professional result in Photoshop. So I got onto this thing called Topaz. Now, Topaz is a suite of AI imaging plugins for Photoshop. So there's Sharpen, there's Denoise, there's Gigapixel, and a few others. And this one was using stabilize mode. And you can see the original capture on the left from the iPhone. I'm going, oh boy, this isn't good. But what the AI has done has created a very usable image on the right-hand side. And it's kind of mind-blowing what that has done. What about the denoise thing? So this is straight from Topaz's own website, where you close your eyes and you picture a loved one. Your brain remembers occasions and their features, and you reconstruct the eyes and the lips and the hair, etc., in your mind. Okay. So they then get an AI model and they train it with deep learning, where basically you take zillions of images and you feed them into the black box. The results are compared. The box is analyzing each image. It's running it through a series of filters. And each time it's tuning its filters to come up with better and better and cleaner results. So the AI interprets an image, it should come up with a better version of what it thinks that image should really look like, or I guess what the photographer intended that image to look like. Indeed, they've gone a step further, where they've then introduced noise mathematically into clean images using various random factors, and they get a critic AI model to then compare and learn to further reduce those errors to try and outwit the original AI, so that eventually you come up with something that they could then obviously release commercially that would be viable for professional photography. Okay, with you so far. So far, so good. Have a look at this image. This again is from the Topaz website. And you can see it shows strong banding artifacts on the left-hand side. But on the right, and this is directly quoted from the Topaz website, the AI has removed those and generated some convincing details. Hold on a second. Hold on. Did it say generated convincing details? How do we feel about that? Because when you look at it to your eye, it appears to be correct. It looks like it's just taken out the noise. And yet the AI has substituted that noise with what it thinks should be there. Okay. You can see where this is going, right? All right, so let's put it to the test. Let's crack open an Astro image and see what all this fancy stuff does. That I took, again, it's off the beaten track. Yes, it's in the Large Magellanic Cloud. The only image of N206, though. There are many examples, many fine examples of this on the web, because it's really quite a beautiful little nebula. So what we've got here are 7 hours of data out of the TAC, with all the darks and flats and so forth. So basically, it's just a stack that you'd get out of any imaging program, whether you're using Deep Sky Stacker or PixInsight, whatever you've used. You've got this image on the left-hand side, which is your result. And 9.5 times out of 10, you'd probably be pretty happy with that. However, we can now go a little bit further, and we can run this thing called StarNet++. And StarNet++ is another neural net AI type interface, which ostensibly does what it says on the ticket. It removes the stars. It's now available, as I understand it, as a module in PixInsight. If you want to run it on my Mac or your own Mac, it's a little bit more complicated because you have to run a command line through terminal. But if you jump on cloudy nights, there's a long thread with about 25 pages of how do you do it, and there's some nice people there who'll give you the answers. But essentially, what it's done, any star removal process means that the AI has to think, well, what was under that star? And has to replace it with what it thinks or guesses is the nebulosity that is there, were it not for the fact that the star has obscured it. And if you look quite closely at this image, it's done a really good job. You sort of look at this thing and you blow it up to 100%, and you go, wow, there's almost no artifacts here. It looks really clean. And, for all intents and purposes, it's done what it's supposed to do, remove the stars. Okay. So let's take that image into Denoise AI and see what we get. Is the image that we just showed you in StarNet. And on the right is the image that we've now run through Topaz's Denoise AI filters. And oh my gosh, what do you make of that? Now, I'm sure that coming across through YouTube and so forth, this probably isn't giving you quite the whole story. So I encourage you to go and do this for yourself. Download a month trial of Topaz, your images, and see what you get. But what I can see here clearly, though, is essentially areas of nebulosity have been refined. They appear sharper, more definition, more wave fronts, more shock fronts. It appears more real, if you like, but there's also some genuinely concerning artifacts here. So if you look at this wacky mask-like head thing at about 12 o'clock and then just come down about a quarter of the way to the frame, you can see this area that, well, it's interpreted what it thinks are dust lanes, and it's done I don't know, it's not a bit inconclusive, the job that it's done there, because it just doesn't quite look real. And indeed, there's another one, if you come in from 3 o'clock on the east, there's another area of dark dust lanes that are just too sharp, too defined to look, aesthetically pleasing or real. By gee, it's, I don't think I'm fooling myself when I say it looks good. Okay. But has it generated these details, or has it just enhanced what was already there? And that's, I guess, this ethical question that we've got to throw out there that probably no one actually can answer. But we can get some opinions, and I'll lead on to that in a second. How I did this? Okay, this is the Topaz denoise AI interface. It's a very clean and easy interface to use. And in this case, what I've done is I've taken the remove noise slider to about 0.3, and the enhanced sharpness slider, yes, it has an enhanced sharpness slider, up to about 0.65. And literally, if you were able to slide this across left and right, this is a screenshot, you would literally see how it cleans that up in one swipe. It's quite gobsmackingly amazing what it's done. But this isn't altogether new. I mean, do you remember this scene from Blade Runner? Blade Runner got it right. 45 years ago, Blade Runner, Rick Deckard was looking at a photograph that he needed enhanced so he could find the serial number on the fingernail of a replicant on the snake skin or something, from memory. And that was 45 years ago, predicting what we are actually seeing happening now. So again, we ask ourselves, well, is it real? Okay, let's test something else. Let's test my image taken with a 5-inch refractor using the denoise AI. Let's put it up against a 20-inch plane wave. And this image by Joseph Druidis was taken under pristine conditions with a 20-inch plane wave in Alice Springs in the middle of the desert in Australia under the darkest sky you can imagine. And mine was taken under light polluted 5 million people, Melbourne, Bortle, 7 skies. But when you compare the two, and I'll leave you to make your own assessments about which one you think is more pleasing, better, different, fake, however you want it to be. But my image looks sharper. And of course, that's because the AI has generated, I guess, sharpness where maybe sharpness doesn't exist. A 20-inch plane wave is it's nothing to sneeze at. That's a serious piece of telescope. And in many ways, Druidis's image on the right is probably more authentic, if you like. But I guess, are we after the pursuit of authenticity, or are we after the pursuit of something that's dynamic and interesting? So that's the thought processes that I guess you go through. In as much as a documentary photographer photographs what's there, and nothing is changed in Photoshop. You can't edit anything. You can't take out a pole or a street light or a piece of trash. It's a documentary image. But many of us don't want to take documentary images. Many of us want to take amazing images that we can put on walls and sell to clients. So again, these are questions that we have to ask ourselves. Scotty says, "You cannot change the laws of physics, Captain. It's not real." Sorry, the Trekkie in me, live long and perspire, people. Aren't we all loving Discovery at the moment? Isn't it great? Fantastic writing on that series at the moment. Here's a quote from Ivo Yaga. Now, Ivo writes Star Tools, which is an image processing program, which is fantastic, really cool. Now, what Ivo says here, and he studies AI, he's an expert in the field. He says it's not just Topaz. You know, many of these standard noise reduction routines are generated specifically for terrestrial scenes. And they're predisposed to reconstruct edges and geometrical shapes non-existent in outer space. Fair enough. Okay. You know, Ivo's right. But don't forget also that these things are trained on portraits. And there's plenty of curves in portraits. So, yeah, okay. What about if Morpheus here, what if he jumped in and said this? So researchers at Santa Cruz University have developed a powerful new computer program called Morpheus that can analyze astronomical image data pixel by pixel to identify and classify all the galaxies and stars in data sets. Morpheus is deep learning. It's AI. And to train it, the researchers are using a study with dozens of astronomers where they've classified 10,000 galaxies. And this is real science. This is happening now. This is sponsored by NASA. So Topaz probably isn't Morpheus by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. You can easily, you know, in as much as, you know, Elon Musk had a dream to people on Mars, and all he did was blow up a bunch of rockets, and now he's well, you know, he's the one smiling with every rocket that he's putting up there now, cheaply and beautifully and perfectly, and landing them and putting astronauts in space, and you know, this is coming. How about a bit of comparison stuff? Hope you guys are getting something out of this, because I just find it fascinating. So this is an image of mine. You can see it's the Lagoon Nebula, classic target data only, but it's a bright thing, so it's reasonably easy to shoot. And if you jump into the core of that one on the right-hand side, go right in deep into the detail of it, you can see a classic example. I guess it's a 5-inch refractor. Yes, it's a Takahashi, but it's, you know, it's a 5-inch refractor. So I ran that image through Topaz. And I might add, I ran the image, the full frame of the image, through Topaz to see what would happen. And sure, it's amazing. It's, you know, it's created a whole bunch of sharper edges and some very obvious definition there. Also, I mean, there's a Photoshop sharpening thing called Find Edges, which does I guess in some ways a similar sort of thing. But has the AI generated these details, or is it just enhancing what's already there? Well, maybe it's both. I don't know, but I'm not saying for a moment that you can plug denoise AI into your image and make a Hubble picture. But we do have the resources of Hubble to draw on, where we can actually jump onto the Hubble Legacy website and we can download an image and we can actually compare, well, what's actually there? So I did that, and I took my original hydrogen alpha stack, ran it through Topaz, and then downloaded a Hubble image of the core of M8 to compare it. And here's what you see right there. And you can interpret that yourself and make up your own mind, but what the AI has interpreted or guessed as being, well, it should be that shape and it should be that definition, is pretty close to correct from what the Hubble's actually shot there. And we've got to accept that the Hubble's, you know, I guess a benchmark for this kind of stuff. So that's, in my opinion, absolutely bloody mind-blowing. So if that center core, which is barely resolvable, barely seen in my original image, and if it looks like this, then it's a reasonable assumption to assume that the rest of it's probably fairly close as well. Although I haven't gone to that much deep testing to prove that yet. But I encourage those of you to do so when you download your Topaz and do your tests, and download a Hubble image and compare it and see for yourself. and then you'll know where you sit. Jumping back into StarNet just for a second, I showed this image 6 weeks ago, the image on the left being the original capture and the image on the right where we stripped the stars out of it, which really showed the nebulosity of the Statue of Liberty Nebula. Yeah, it looked great, apods and all that kind of stuff. But I recently had a client who said, look, I want a poster of this image. And the client actually decided they wanted a poster of the image with stars in it. So I thought, okay, fair enough. But when I went to visit that file more closely, and it's the one on the right that you're seeing when I enlarged it, it was like, oh, geez, it's a bit grainy. You know, this was taken on a big Newtonian, but it was only taken on a smaller version of my current camera. So it was an APS-C chip. And it was a bit noisy. And I thought, well, you know, I've used Nick Define. I've done everything that I can here. Let's try this new Topaz thing out and see what it does. So what I've done on the left is reprocessed it using the Topaz AI. And this is now at 30 inches, I might add. This is a huge enlargement. And it's clean as a whistle. It's like, wow, look at that. It's sharp, it's clean, it's beautiful. And it looks amazing. So it's a bit of an endorsement for the product. But I do need to put a caveat in here. Don't do Topaz anything on stars. Take the stars out and then put them in later, because all these noise reduction softwares, they're pretty horrendous with what they do to stars. They box them, they shape them, they kind of put edges that aren't there. It's quite hideous. So be warned. Don't go messing with denoise and stars, guys. So that's it. The can of worms is now open. I'll leave you to interpret and form your own conclusions there. I can't see the comments on this at the moment, so I don't know whether you're loving it or hating it, but you know, I'm sure it's polarized a few people. It certainly has on a bit of debate on some threads here in Australia.
It's not too bad yet.
Well, there are a couple of questions that have come up, Andy. A simple one, what kind of filters do you use?
As in the brand?
Brand and how
yeah,
wide?
I use Chroma filters. Again, when I went to buy 2-inch filters, I had previously used Astrodons, and I've been very, very happy with them. But 2-inch Astrodons are, oh gosh, it was close to 8,000 or 9,000 Australian dollars to buy an entire set. The Chromas were better value, and I later learned that Chroma Factory actually used to produce Astrodon filters, so I figured, well, they're probably pretty good, and they've turned out to be just fine for me. Very happy with them.
So why don't we jump in just to the controversial questions with AI? I say that, let me throw in a couple of my own. I've been using the Topaz product for, I'll say about a year.
Okay.
Their denoise, their detail, and then the third one that will upscale everything, which performs similar kinds of things to adding more detail. And I guess my overall comment is it works pretty well as you've described, provided you have really bright objects. And if you don't have really bright objects and you don't have a high SNR, that it generates just a myriad of details. Also, I think that there was a question here about using the denoise functions in PixInsight. And I think in some ways they're really, I don't want to say the equivalent of, in some ways superior and more manageable than some of the denoise functions in Topaz. So I think that everyone should really consider that, especially TGV denoise. So I think you really have to be very careful about some of these AI functions, because a lot of it, you know, it's under the hood. You don't really see what it's doing. And it can really generate some artifacts. And once you look at it, you go, oh my God, what have I done? I'm not sure that it has on your images, but it does function well, and it has produced some nice results in very bright objects. And I think that would be my conclusion.
It's also, thanks for those
But-
points, Eric. It's also been suggested that it's absolutely dreadful on planetary imaging,
I haven't
Where
tried
it's
it on
creating-
planetary, but it's probably right.
creating details that aren't there and so forth, which show up when the guys do the rotation and all that kind of stuff.
And Eric, are the applications that you're using from Topaz, are they using artificial intelligence to do what they do?
Oh, it's actually the same programs that Andy's using. It's AI denoise.
Okay.
There's the upscale gigapixel AI gigapixel,
And
and
AI
then,
token is their other one.
yeah, and I mean, they're not inexpensive. They're standalone programs, and I think they can be add-on to Photoshop, but I use them as standalone program. They are very interesting. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it really says, okay, I mean, any program where you can punch a button more or less and say, can I get more detail, or I can remove noise? You know, people do want to try it. Just be careful with it, and don't go out and buy it until you've really tested it out on the images that you can take. And there is no substitute for more data and high SNRs before
Exactly
you do
right.
anything on it. I mean, that's I would say
Exactly right.
requirement number one. And I don't mean to add or detract from your presentation, but we've spent a lot of hours with these AI programs thinking they were the magic bullet. And it turns out, like a lot of things, they're a tool.
Yep, that's true. So where to from here, guys? So is it time to try something new or different? Do you want to try a different field of view? Do you want to get yourself a new telescope so you can position yourself slightly differently? Are we going to keep putting our objects in the middle of the frame, or are we going to think about what's around it in space that might balance that image, that star cluster that balances that galaxy? Why are we cropping it out? Why are we putting the Trifid in the middle of the frame all the time when it's got a really lovely star cluster next to it? Maybe we should look at some of these new techniques, methods. Or dare I say it, we could experiment with a little bit of AI and see what we get. Tweak your color palettes, or indeed do some research and maybe find something new to photograph. Because at the end of the day, we want to create images that are impactful, that are emotive, and that tell a story. And so that's me pretty much done there, guys. Just recap that's where you can find me. Plenty of resources there for finding us, and of course, wouldn't be right to not include a deal there. So currently, if you want to do some mentoring, we've got to pay for 5 and get 1 session free. So that's just for you guys. Thank you for having me back here, folks, and getting a chance to finish that presentation. It's been an awesome privilege, guys, and good luck. So, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Andy. Could you take us back to the? Can you turn your web browser? Take your PowerPoint off. Put your web browser on and take us into Milky Way Explorer. Can you do that?
Let me just give you 2 seconds. 2 seconds, and I'll see if I can find that for you. Here we go. Okay, I've got my web browser on. So I go to
share your screen.
Yeah, one moment. I'll just move that up here and make it bigger. And run on share screen. A moment, guys. We'll just switch between apps. Okay, go back to you. I'll bring share screen. Okay. There you go. Can you see that now?
You're not. There we go. Now you're starting. Oh, am I on delay? Yeah. Okay. I don't know how to get to that page. I get to a different page when I go to Milky Way Explorer. when I Google Milky Way Explorer to find it, this is
Yeah.
not where I wind up.
Okay.
How do I get there? Do you know?
Well, you could. I can send you the link. How about that? That's probably the easiest thing.
Well, I've got the link to something.
I'm
called
in the
Milky Way
book.
The
Explorer.
website, it's galaxymap.org is what he's showing.
Galaxymap.org, but it's within Galaxy Map, I guess, that Alex is trying to find
Yeah.
where to go. Because galaxymap.org it probably has a website function.
Okay. Well, let's not worry about it. It's just.
But what I'll do for you is I'll send you this link,
Okay. Thank you.
and that might make it a lot easier.
Okay. Now let's get back. Let's get back to the meat of your discussion here. Jeff pointed out. Jeff Weiss, is it? Yeah. Like, where is this rule that you have to have? Yeah. Where's this rule that you have to have your pictures done a certain way? Don't we already change what we see out there an awful lot, just in image processing?
I'm not quite sure exactly what the question is.
The question is, well, it isn't a question. It's just one side of the argument. I think your point was that we have to be careful when we're using artificial intelligence to decide what was in the picture, because it may be putting things in there maybe weren't quite there.
Yep.
But aren't we already putting things into our astro images that weren't quite there? For instance, my example in my comments was the colors of M42. If we were floating around in a spaceship up around M42, things would be gray. They wouldn't have colors.
Yep.
So how different is it that, I mean, as long as we're not doing scientific research, I mean, isn't the Hubble palette artificial?
Absolutely right. I think it comes down to the first part of my presentation.
Yeah.
We talk about what pleases us. When you're making a nice image, pleasing to you, is it the kind of thing that you might want to share with your friends? Is it the kind of thing you might want to put in a gallery and maybe sell it? These are some decisions that you can make when you're doing astro. But I guess the whole point of my presentation is maybe not doing the same thing over and over again just because someone else has done it that way. Why do we put the horse head there and the flame there? Why do we have M42 on an angle with the running man? Why is it always the frame the same? What rule is out there that says I have to copy that image because if I don't, I've got it wrong?
Okay. I think all the questions have been answered, right?
Well, Alex,
Yeah.
remember what Joe said a couple weeks ago, and Joe's the guy that does all these space telescope images.
Mhm.
He does lots of things in order to clean them up, to put in, if he's missing some data, to combine them with a couple of other images to fill it out. But he never puts stars in where they weren't before. And whether it's stars or anything else where they weren't before, where you make up an image, I think that's the line that's crossed.
Mhm.
It's not making it a little sharper or extrapolating to an endpoint. But when you're obviously putting something in that doesn't belong there because it might look nice, I think that's the point where we shouldn't be doing it. Or if we are, we should make a footnote saying, hey, I put that in there. It doesn't really exist.
When you had the pictures up there of the woman, that you had the 3 different versions of the woman's picture, one of them had her hair right in proper order. And maybe her hair wasn't really in proper order that day. But the artificial intelligence corrected it to where it was.
Yep.
And that's wrong if we're scientists, but it's not wrong if we want to sell a lady a pretty picture of herself.
Exactly right.
I think we're giving too much credit to these AI programs. I don't think I don't think they can fix people's hair, at least not yet, right, Andy?
Look, the results are pretty spectacular with what you can what you can do with that on a terrestrial level, certainly in the world of portraits that I inhabit. I guess it comes down to that debate earlier about documentary photography, versus whatever you want to call what I do, which is probably a bit of a twist on that.
Okay.
Out of it, changed the colors and done all the other stuff. It's probably not a true representation of it's pretty.
Bill Gwynn made a comment here. I think it's worth repeating. If we're not doing science, then what are we doing? We're doing art. There are no rules to art. I'm not sure that's true, but that's what he says. The best art breaks the rules in an interesting new way, in my humble opinion. And I think we agree with that.
Yep.
Okay. I think that we can resolve this if we just discuss it long enough.
I think we should arm wrestle for it. I think that's what we should do.
Maybe we should start wrapping up
a
the
couple of
show.
bottles of red to help with the discussion, guys.
Okay. Will is coming back next week to tell us about night vision imaging and things like that. And we are always looking for new presenters. It's been a stressful time. 2020 is coming to a close, and we can all be thankful for that. So have a good Thanksgiving. Hope it's all virtual so you're not passing germs around to each other. But we will be back next Sunday night. And please be here, join us, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. If there's nothing else, can I turn it back over to Molly to sign us out?
Yep.
Okay,
right.
Molly. Oh, by the way, Molly, thanks for all your work here. I know it's very stressful to try to get all this right, but thank you.
It's more stressful when I keep screwing it up and then have to fix it while the stream is running. But
there's more to this conversation, Molly. There is more to this conversation. So we'll talk about it after.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No, wait a minute. Let's not be cruel with Molly. She's doing a great job. Andy, you want to stay on after we close the broadcast?
Just for a few minutes, guys.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Will, you're
Okay.
well. All right.
Bye-bye, everybody.
So,
You're in charge, Molly.
okay.